stream is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking About Survivor. I'm Christiana Ellis.
I'm Mike Mateen.
Tonight, we are talking about Survivor Season 40, Winners at War, Episode 3. And I'm just going to go ahead and call it Episode 3 because that seems to be the numbering scheme that they are using as well, despite the 2-hour premiere. We talked about that last time.
Yeah, we don't need to spend any more time on it.
That's correct. So, this episode, I think, had a lot of people, a lot of fan reaction upset at the person ousted this time. In some ways, partly just because he's kind of a fan favorite, had this great story, this narrative for him to be coming back on the show, and then gets voted out for something like wasn't even really even about him.
No.
And but boy, at the same time, the person who's kind of the whole mechanisms for how that played out though is some good Survivor coming out of some. I was going to say bad Survivor, but what I'll say is risky Survivor. It's clearly a bad decision made by Adam in hindsight. And it was obviously risky going in. But if it had paid off, I don't think we would have been saying that was stupid. He's super lucky. We would have said, wow, he took a big swing and it paid off. But in this case, nope. Sometimes you take a big swing and you don't hit. It does not pay off. And,
and I really liked their reaction to it because, usually it goes two different ways. Like either they get so frustrated with Adam that they just join the other group who wants to get rid of him anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Or they stick to the plan, but they just register it in the back of their minds that, okay, like Adam's kind of sketchy with that. Like we need to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
But for them to change it and say, well, no, we're still going to break up the three we want. We're just not going to tell Adam we're doing it the way that. So send a message to him that he is not part of this if he's going to go do things like that. Yeah. And we still get the result we want, but yet we make it crystal clear for Adam that he doesn't get to make these decisions and then go do this stuff with Rob and think that this has no repercussions.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I would be prepared to say all of those people are obviously very smart and playing good Survivor, except why didn't they just vote out Rob? They
fair.
Could have and did not.
That's fair. I didn't even, that's the power he has. It's like, it almost is like he wasn't even a consideration.
The explicit stated reason for voting out Ethan was to weaken Rob. They could have just voted for Rob. There would have been nothing he could have done about it.
He's much weaker not there.
Yeah. Now, I think, we'll maybe talk a little bit more about that, but the only explanation I think that makes any sense is the idea that, he's such an obvious target that it's the whole kind of meat shield lightning rod sort of idea, except that Rob has shown in the past his ability to have the people around him think that that's what they're doing up until the point where he turns the tables on them and gets them voted out. So yeah. So anyway, let's talk about just kind of what are some of the highlights of this episode. We got Tony and the shark.
Yep.
That's some good stuff.
I mean, that's one of the biggest highlights when he goes to grabs the shark and it starts biting at him and he starts running through the sand, still holding on to it, didn't drop it.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's just as well. I mean, I don't know, like, I drop it in the sand. I don't think it's going to get away or anything. But at the same time, him running away from it, still sort of yelling, just sort of. Okay, so this is I'm going to have a tangent that's not really related at all, except for the connection that it just made in my brain right now. Is that my little dog Rocket, who is actually being relatively quiet tonight. You know, I'm gonna not tempt fate, give him a little treat while he's being quiet. Occasionally will swallow a long hair that he gets off the floor or off of my head and does not digest it. And so what happens is that when he goes to poop, the poops kind of are coming out on a string. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, he finds that terrifying. And he runs away from his poop, yelping with terror that it's following him and chasing him. And I want to be sympathetic for the real fear he is experiencing, and yet. There's such an easy solution, Tony. You just put it down. Yeah. But in any event, that was some fun stuff. It seemed like it was but like that's where when we talk about players being good TV, like Tony provided some excellent highlights this week. There's the shark, there's the attempt at camouflage makeup with Sarah later.
Yes.
Silly. He is fun to watch on TV. I don't think he's going to win the season.
No, I agree with both statements.
What's another highlight for you?
I think, like you said, the Sarah having to getting into camouflage and infiltrating the other camp was a highlight to get the idol out of one of their torches. The hunt for the clue or whatever it is, I forget what they get on. On
Edge of Extinction.
On Edge of Extinction, that whole sequence was all pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, and what Natalie got was that that steal a vote opportunity that she could sell to another player. And I read like Dalton Ross's recap where he was saying he was like surprised she didn't give that one to Jeremy also, but like Jeremy wouldn't have a second fire token, would he? Or does he have another one? Maybe he has one that was left. Oh, because they all would have had one, and she left him hers originally.
Right.
So he would have had two. So theoretically, she could have given him that second one also.
Yeah, but it also would have been as far as she knows, his last one. And is it number one? Is it necessary to give him that again and burn his last one? Mm-hmm. Also, it makes sense to have a few people who are indebted to you if you do make it back.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's probably what it comes down to, is just trying to spread those gifts out. You know, Jeremy is already, a good ally and that she could count on, but, he can't do it all by himself, so spread it out a little bit. I will say, having successfully attained it, Steal a Vote is much more practically useful than Jeremy's one. Jeremy's is just sort of, it's sort of an emergency ripcord. But it would be really hard to use proactively.
Right.
But it's better to have it than to not, I guess. Unless you just get all flustered with it. But, obviously a big moment in the episode is Adam deciding that he thought that if they had the numbers to solidly vote out Parvati, regardless of whatever Rob might have to say about it, that he's thinking maybe he'll appreciate the honesty. I can make it like I'm the one that's having it be her and not him. And, so I would still theoretically be able to work with him afterwards. And, he's talking about how, like, on his own season, he played around with that sort of thing. But it's also a sort of situation where when he's about to make a move and there's the confessional for him saying, now a lot of people would say this is a really bad idea. But at the same time, again, it's like the way from his perspective, he's trying to make big moves and take big swings. It's early in the season still. Theoretically, it could have backfired more dramatically than it did. But at the same time, he's feeling like he is not considered one of the major players otherwise. So he has to do stuff if he wants to be relevant.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it was kind of funny, like I even had that sort of jotted down, like if this works, like then Adam is the MVP of this episode or whatever we call it,
Yeah.
But obviously this is now we have to decipher what went wrong, but I think it's pretty easy. What went wrong is you told Rob you were getting rid of his number one ally.
Right.
And then you tried to recruit Ethan to do it. And it's also his number one ally.
There's a moment where maybe you feel like he could have taken a step back and said, wait a minute, isn't part of the reason we're voting off Parvati to split up this too tight old school alliance? So they're already too close and that's the problem? But I think I'm going to be able to sell them on joining that effort. Well, and also I think it's one thing for ordinary players to kind of be a little bit more uncertain in that sort of situation. But like Rob is the last guy, I feel like, if you want to sort of play, subtle alpha mind games with of like, look, this is happening regardless of what you do about it. But, if you play along, maybe we can have it work out better after this happens. Like that sort of approach might work for a lot of people. But Rob is like the last guy to try that on, I think.
Right.
I mean, as demonstrated, and at the same time, it's like, I didn't know for sure that it wouldn't work when he did it. But, sometimes, it not only didn't work, but it very dramatically it didn't work a lot.
Correct.
So we immediately had every other person in that tribe saying, what the hell was he thinking? Like, his own allies, the people he was trying to target. But I would say another highlight is, like, as you mentioned, the reaction though from Michelle and Jeremy seems to be kind of leading that, saying, we still have the votes, even without Adam. And so we could still take out one of these old school players. We can deliberately not do what Adam wanted to make it obvious that he is not, to make it clear that this is no longer his plan that's happening.
Right.
I think, as we talked about, we still could say, could have still taken out Rob. But I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just Jeremy wants the meat shield. Maybe that's the logic, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, I think that's exactly what they're all hoping for, is that is that they can work with him until they're trying to do to him what he does to people, which is, find a way to keep him around and work with him until they're ready to get rid of him.
Yeah. And
that's very dangerous.
Well, it definitely is dangerous because on the one hand, I don't know, I have mixed feelings because it's another example of a risky thing that maybe will pay off, because while we know that Rob is certainly a very, very dangerous player to keep around, there is probably something to the idea that everybody knows that. And so at a certain point, how far is everyone else going to be willing to let Rob go?
Right.
So, having, the strategy of having him be a meat shield lightning rod could be a very effective one, but it's a little bit of the holding the tiger by the tail, right?
Or the
The
shark.
trick is how do you then let it go? Get him out at the end. But we'll see. Did you have any other like highlights?
Sorry that you went quiet. Like,
Oh,
you keep like, pausing and speeding up. I think it's something. It looks like internet.
well, I mean, like it might just be that the Hangout is being wonky again. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
So every once in a while, I lose like a word or two you said. So what did you
okay.
ask me?
Did you have any other significant moments that anything you would, what would you say is your favorite moment?
I mean, I feel like I almost had to give it back to Natalie again for
Mm,
being able to find the piece again, especially since I thought Amber was gonna do it. Like, and I love that Amber was being sneaky about it
mm-hmm.
and going back. She thought she knew where the numbers were. She snuck back to camp. She had the wrong set of numbers, so then Natalie snuck back to camp. Like
Yeah.
that whole sequence was a lot of fun. Um, with them trying to outsmart each other while being on a team, but still
Mm-hmm.
competing with each other. And then for Natalie to be the one who was ultimately victorious, I mean, she's building a pretty strong resume from being the first person out. If she can get back in the game and last,
Yeah.
she's not going to have that, issue of, oh, well, you just sat over on extinction the whole time, like you can't win the game. You
Mm-hmm.
know, now there's a lot left for that to happen for her, but for the hand she's been dealt so far, she's been maximizing it. So I was pretty impressed with her. I have to give it to her again. Yeah.
I agree. That was actually what I was going to pick as my favorite moment as well. In particular, the smashing the shells on the necklace, so that like if anyone else even managed to say, "Hey, wait, what about those shells?" If they went back to try to figure it out, it wouldn't work.
Right. Cool. Because yeah, that was the interesting part is that actually there was one set of beads for each of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like there were three,
Yeah.
and so she hid one, broke one, so that they could still find it if they started looking for it. But it wouldn't be all of
Mm-hmm.
them wouldn't be there, but they wouldn't all be gone, so they wouldn't look for the other one, but they wouldn't be useful. It was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I also am pretty pleased with the cleverness of the wording of the whole little sign of "You have been given all you need to solve the puzzle."
Yeah.
Yeah, cause Amber's thought about like, oh, I remember seeing numbers on that wood. Like that was a good thought too. Ultimately, not correct as we saw, but I also agree it was nice the bit with Danny and Natalie still standing there with the combination lock, trying random things, and then they're kind of looking around like, where'd Amber go? She must have thought of something.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
When you have to
So
wonder if the crates were purposely painted with those numbers to be confusing, or if it just happened to be a thing that
just a coincidence of
just a
set
weird
dressing.
coincidence. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it might be that it wasn't something planned at a high level, but it was something that like the set dressers said, "Hey, we know that they're going to do some number puzzles later, so what if we put some red herring numbers on here?" I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So, what about biggest surprise? I mean, it might still be one of the things we talked about, but
I mean, I think the biggest surprise was Adam deciding that was a good idea.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it really did just seem like I get.
I know we get what he was trying to do. We know his explanation. Like it wasn't
Hmm.
just some idiotic thing that like he just came up with out of nowhere. Like he had a plan, and I get just like we talked about. He's got to do stuff. He's not seen as a power player, but this was still surprising that was his decision. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. It was just well, and it just backfired so spectacularly too. So I'll do kind of a a tangent of that, which was to say I was most surprised with the way that the others managed to pull off not fall. Like it was just like you said earlier. Usually, you would say either the person whose plan backfires becomes the new target, or people just go along with the original plan anyway. But in this case, they actually pulled off doing something else. And we can argue about the wisdom of taking out Ethan rather than Rob, but the truth is it was certainly intentional, right? It's they they had to know they could have voted out Rob, so they must have decided to do Ethan instead for a reason. Whether we would agree or not, I mean, it wasn't an accident, right? And so, I mean, I
Correct.
think that was pretty impressive. And oh, how did I in highlights? How did I not mention the whole bit with Rob coming up to Michelle and Jeremy and just saying, what are we talking about? Like, let's talk about Adam. And they're like, oh yeah, we were just talking about, is it going to be Ben or Adam or Denise? And he's like, no, no, no. We know that's fake. Let's just move past that.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. I just loved that he was just like, okay, no, all right, come on, let's just not. we, there's several steps more past that we need to get through. So before I can tell you what's happening now.
Well, and I think they both handled it really well as also in
Yeah,
that they it didn't catch. I mean, it caught them off guard, but they didn't fumble.
right.
They just think, no, no. What are you talking about? No, it's Adam. He's like, oh well, no. Adam told me. He's like, they're like, yeah, I don't know what he's talking about. They were able to agree that they knew, but not be so caught that they didn't. They were able to compose themselves
Yeah.
basically. So
Well, one thing I really like about Rob as a player, though, is that, like, because he's kind of the old pro at this point, the veteran, right? Like, he totally doesn't take it personally, right? Like, it's not
right.
like the fact that, like, oh, these people that I'm talking to now were involved with a plan to vote out one of my allies. Like, he's not mad. He gets it. It's like if he were in their place, yeah, that's what he would be doing too. But he's not. He's in his
Yeah.
own place, and so he's doing his thing. But I like that. So as far as MVP, I mean, I think we might both be talking about Natalie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. Well, just so that we're not picking the same person, although I certainly, will concede that. I think that I think that I'm going to pick Jeremy on the basis that it's an interesting choice to take out Ethan instead of Rob. And I want to wait and see how he manages to handle that because it is just an indication of play where he's thinking several steps down the line, right? Like, is it the right move? We'll have to see. But a shorter term plan would have been Rob is dangerous, get rid of Rob. Ethan's not as dangerous, keep him around. But to attempt to weaken Rob while keeping him around as a lightning rod, risky, but interesting and complicated. And I like that a lot.
Yep.
I think it may still backfire, but we'll see. All right, so what went wrong for poor Ethan?
I
mean,
mean, he was the third person when they decided they didn't want to get rid of Rob and they wanted to send Adam a message by not doing what Adam wanted
yeah,
and not telling him. Ethan was the last guy left. So
yeah,
and he couldn't have known. No one warned him. They kept it very tight between themselves.
mm-hmm.
He didn't have an idol. There wasn't much for him to do at that point. He thought it was down to either Parvati or Adam, and he
Mm-hmm.
was voting for Adam and hoping that they had the majority, but willing to say goodbye to Parvati. And as much as he did not like that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that he had any way of figuring this out and
Yeah.
doing anything about it. Yeah.
Well, like, because there's a part of me that was wanting to say he could have not stuck tight to that old, alliance with Parvati. Like, he could have joined forces with the others, right? Like, in theory, if he had actually been more open to that, it might have changed his fate, but that also would have been a very different game than the one he was really actually trying to play. And he probably had the impression that he didn't need to do that. But, it's just like in hindsight, it, I think he still played it well because, like, when they approached him, he kind of made noises like maybe he's okay with that, and then immediately told the confessional, "Of course I'm not okay with that. She's my number one."
Right.
But at the same time, like, I don't think he just blew it by like coming across as totally inflexible or anything. But it's also possible that, like, if he had been a little bit more actually open to that plan, things might have played out differently.
Yeah, but it's also hard for him to be open to that plan when Rob goes on that tear. You
Yeah.
know, like they kind of dug in because so all the things work together. Like the
Mm-hmm.
fact that Adam went to Rob and Rob then got and dug in. Well, that's why Ethan then kind of had to be a part of that as well. They also
Yeah.
thought they had a legitimate shot at maybe getting Adam, maybe convincing those others. They knew it wasn't likely, but why go with them when he can see there's already some discord over there? So the whole reason that he was the one that got picked by them was also the reason why he was digging in on the other side. So just the sequence of events, it just would have been so difficult for him to do much
Yeah.
different.
I think it's one of those things where we can say, looking back with perfect hindsight, we can imagine different moves that might have produced a different outcome. But from the perspective that he was operating in, it wouldn't have made sense to do anything other than what he was doing already. It's
Right.
like if he has what he sees as a close ally in Parvati, why would he be willing to throw her under the bus to join with this alliance of people who have enough numbers that they don't need him and he's not as close with? I mean, that why would that make sense?
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
But then again, had he done that, might not have been voted out this time. So, like, that's the calculus that you have to do in this game sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah. But in any event, room for improvement. You have advice for anyone there on the show still?
I mean, stop keeping Rob around.
Yeah.
I
It's going to
feel like that's
backfire
room for
eventually.
improvement. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I mean, we'll see if it works, but
Mm-hmm.
that's the biggest advice I have is that they stop tinkering around with trying to weaken him, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously our advice for Adam I mean, he knows he's got to get himself back in their good graces.
Yeah.
He needs to accept, I know this isn't necessarily room for improvement, also advice for him going forward. Like he needs to accept the point of what they were trying to do,
Yeah.
which was to humble him. And he needs to take his humble pie, at least for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And again, some of the previews for next time make it seem like maybe he's not doing that. And therefore now putting himself back into it as a target. But we'll see. I mean, that would be my advice is like, hey, realize what they did to you.
Yeah.
They still wanted to do the plan. They just wanted you to know that you're not the one controlling all of this. And by telling Rob, you pissed him off.
I think, though, that's how much of that is Adam's fault and how much of that is Rob and Parvati, now with their backs against the wall a little bit, turn up the game, the volume quite a bit on,
yeah,
well, you guys have the majority now, obviously, and so really you have the control of whether you want to move forward with someone who's going to just throw your plans under the bus that way. I mean, that's just that. Is that the kind of game you want to play? I don't know. It would, if it were me, I wouldn't want to do that, but
yeah.
It'll be interesting to see the two of them in a slightly more defensive position, right? Because certainly losing Ethan and the just having the vote not go the way they wanted you know, that those two players in particular, like their best seasons, they were almost always playing from a position of strength. And that's to their credit for maintaining it that way, but they're not always as, it'll be interesting to see how they try to reassert control if they can.
Yep.
Yeah. We'll see. So, I think that's our show for this episode.
Yep.
We're, it occurs to me one more segment we could potentially do is just like, I guess it still falls into the room for improvement. Like, what do you want to see happen next time?
I mean, I'd like to see them not lose again. I mean, I'd like
Yeah.
to see the other tribe have to do something.
Yeah, I agree. Looks like we might have some medical issue at edge of extinction, but like it was so vague, who could say?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we'll see. So, in the meantime, there's another episode of Survivor this week, and we'll be back to talk about it. So, try to survive until then.
Yay.